Perfect. Let me just get you back on there. Hi, everybody. Dr. Laura Foster here, Soul Inspired Girl, or as my computer told me the other day, Spider Woman. I don't know. It called me that the other day. We are here for another episode, a very casual episode of Soul She Says. And today I'm pretty excited because I have one of my, she doesn't know this, but in a way she mentors me. I have Erin McDonald with me. Erin, thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. How exciting is this?
I am fairly sad sometimes that I'm living in Ontario because Erin is one of the people that I got to know a lot better in my last couple of years in Ontario. And as much as it's wonderful that we can gather on Zoom, it's just not the same thing.
It's so true.
So true. So the reason that I wanted you to come on here and you're so gracious to say yes is because this group is what I would call a very conscious, a growing group of women who are wanting to have a lot more of what you and I would consider to be next level conversations, the more authentic versions, the conversation that we could have, and then the conversation we're choosing to have, as you know. And I happen to know, because I know you well enough to know that you have had an incredible journey that I think is top of the heart and top of my mind right now because of everything that's going on. And first of all, let me just say, well, how about you introduce yourself? You're a mom, you have two incredible kids, which are so fun to watch on Instagram and so on. And tell me a little bit about your past and your history in terms of what you've been doing for the last 20 years or so.
Oh, right. So
right.
We'll start there. Two great kids. Obviously, I'm in one of the bedrooms. This isn't my room.
To be clear.
Yeah. My 13-year-old son's hockey room. So we have a very open concept house. So I often will just lock myself in whatever room's not being used. So this is it today. So yeah, I have a 13-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. And that's been the last little while, I guess, obviously raising those two. And up until 2 years ago, I was a police dispatcher and a 911 call taker. I'm 43 and I started that job in 2001, so almost half of my life. And basically what we talked about, I reached a burnout point and really had to take a step back and reevaluate. And now I'm kind of at the point where I'm figuring out what's next and changed a whole lot of things in my life.
Yeah. And let's pause right there because that in and of itself is a huge thing. And, it's interesting. I think I met you initially when you were still dispatching, perhaps.
You know what? You met me at probably my worst point. And I had only been off work for about 3 weeks at that point.
Yeah.
But actually, no, when we knew each other already, but when we went away, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. So the reason that, I thought that it was really poignant to talk about this right now is because I know you and I, in the back conversation of all this, are really recognizing that there's a lot of energetic fatigue and symptoms of burnout. And as much as we can talk about the grandiose of how those things really take you to a tipping point, I want to talk about that in terms of, what that looked like and felt for you. But I also, I want to speak about this in terms of what does it look like on the microcosm? Like, what are some of the things that were coming up for you? Because I know it came to a head, like things often do. I have that story, you have that story, different but same. Things come to a head, they bubble up, they explode. You have to do something with it. What did you do with it when it happened for you? Like, what was leading up to this point where you had what you would call burnout now?
So for me, I was experiencing different things for about 5 years before I actually was I guess the universe sort of cracked me on the head and said, enough's enough.
Yeah.
I had extreme fatigue. I was so tired that I could get my kids on the bus in the morning. And if I didn't leave my house, I could go to sleep until they got off the bus in the afternoon. I was going to my doctor for 5 years complaining of this.
Yeah.
And severe brain fog. I couldn't retain things anymore. And my job was, it was an important,
Yeah.
that's an important skill to have when you're dealing with emergencies all the time. And leading up to that as well, we had both of our moms. I should add to my family that I have the best husband
You
in the
do.
world. Yeah.
It's
I
noted.
shouldn't I shouldn't just say, oh, my kids, he's awesome. So yeah, we had both of our moms were very sick near the time when I like was literally kind of hit on the head. There was just this pressure was creeping up and creeping up. I had fallouts with a few friendships because things just weren't aligning with the way I needed to go, and I had to break off different pieces.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like things were just kind of crumbling, and it felt awful at the time. And I really didn't want those things to happen. But they were all happening for me. Now I realize, but it
Yeah.
really sucked
Yeah.
at the
I
time.
like that you say that though, that, at the time, not great, didn't feel awesome at all, probably felt on some level like this transition that you were making, and you never know where you're going when you're in the middle of a transition necessarily, or often we don't. And these things are happening and we can't put them in perspective when we're in them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, big time. And like I said to you, we had similar, like our stories are similar in that we did different things to try to avoid what that bad stuff felt like. And so I did a few fitness competitions, and I traveled, and I dabbled in some like network marketing companies. Like, just in hindsight, it was anything that I could do to get my mind off how I was actually feeling, to the point that I didn't even really know what I felt.
Yeah. And how did I'm assuming this probably came on fairly gradually.
It did, again, in hindsight, but at the time it felt like all of a
All of a
sudden
sudden.
everything just happened. And the way I described it, uh-oh, I think we're frozen.
It's okay.
You there?
It'll come
Okay.
through in the recording. Okay.
Okay. So the way I described it was that, like, when I had a little bit of perspective a few months later, still not a whole lot because I was in the thick of it, but it felt like I literally ran into a wall, hit the wall like face first, fell on my back, and somebody was standing on my chest. And
Mm.
so that felt like it just happened. But then when I was able to step back and I looked at those 5 years of
Yeah.
complaining,
Yeah.
I realized that there was a lot more leading up to it.
And why do you think that what were the things that contributed in your mind to why you didn't take in those symptoms when they were small, when they were like nudges or like elbows or?
So the job that I did,
Yeah.
it's very military run. It's policing, and it's very male dominant. And there's a very, like, I'm a police supporter,
Yeah.
but there's a big I don't know what the, like, I'm losing words, but like the mentality that you signed up for this,
Right.
and it's a weakness. And the terms like PTSD, uh, you think of things like that for people that are really bad, like that are really suffering. And it became sort of like, even in my mind, I thought, like, when it was mentioned to me that I should be I should see somebody and see if there is anything like that underlying, I scoffed at it because I said, that what is that, the diagnosis of the week?
Mm.
And it's a bad way to look at it, but it's kind of the way it is. And like I said, it being that military sort of environment, it's very male dominant as well. So you get hard,
Right.
and
You're celebrated for being hard or um, maybe more mechanistic and you know, I'm sure there wasn't a whole lot of room, or I'm imagining there wasn't a whole lot of room for your feminine side, right?
No.
This, the side really, and a side that probably, you know, had, if that in, let's just say industry, if that industry was overhauled and looked at a little differently, we'd be able to celebrate these two aspects of the male and the feminine, the masculine and the feminine, that help us rise to the occasion, right? Because obviously there's a reason that 50% of the population is female. Women do have this innate ability to be able to, not just the nurturing and all that, but our ability to sense what's needed before it's said, and that ability to connect energetically with what goes on. I mean, I'm sure on many, many, many levels, it's what made you so damn good at your job. But on the other hand, when it came to reflecting back on what you needed and how you needed to be supported in that job, it probably, just exactly what you said, is it was looked at from very much a masculine perspective.
It was for sure. And there was the femininity, like the feminine side, that I can look back and see in myself when talking to callers. So when I would go into my job, either I would be call taking and answering the phones, and that would be like anything you can imagine.
Yeah.
Or I would be dispatching police. And they're two, it's the same job, but they're two very different parts of the job. But I could be very, very, very nurturing to people that need help. And because I'm a helper, and I've realized that's just what I am. So if somebody needs my help, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get that person help, whether it's just my voice on the other end of the line for somebody to talk to, or actually getting them the resources, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, the support, they're getting better at it.
Yeah.
But there's a long way to go. And there were several times where, quite frankly, it just wasn't there.
Well, and the interesting thing too is that, you know, I grew up modeling myself. I don't know where this came from. I grew up modeling how I was going to show up successfully in the world, modeling a lot of my dad. And so that part of me that I rarely gave myself a soft place to land. You know, you're the person who's showing up to nurture the other people, but where were you to show up and nurture yourself? Now, let me just ask you this though, on some level of being on the other side of this, being on the recovering side of it, what were the things that you had to take stock of? Like, what was the transition for you?
Oh, like everything.
Yeah.
Literally, like I said, there was friendships that collapsed, and that was me already, like when I was still there, already changing. And things just, it was, the best way I can say is things were out of alignment, and I started to realize it, and more, but even before I had left. So there was friendships that just didn't align with me anymore, and it was like, are you hanging on to this because of years of service?
Yeah.
And that's like a work term, I guess.
Yeah.
But like to friendships as well, like are you hanging on to them because you've been friends for a long time? Like people grow apart, and it doesn't mean that you're friends for life. It was creating new friendships and putting myself in different places. Whereas before, one thing I'm very glad that I did do was maintain my life outside of that job. So when I left, really, my personal life didn't really change because of that. It changed because of the decisions I started making and the places I started putting myself, like with you, and like the people that I have around me today, I did not have around me 3 years ago. And it was this trickle effect. And then the more people I had around me, the more ways I looked to better my health, to better my mental health, outside of the box thinking, not going to my doctor and complaining and not getting the answers, different ways with my kids, just everything.
Yeah. And a big part of this was from observation, your lifestyle, right? What you chose to fill your days with, you know, who you, like you just said, who you spent your time with, how you nourished your body, how you moved your body. It was almost, from my perspective, looking in, like you were relearning and re-remembering who you not were, but are. And on some level, and just aligning your life to match who you truly are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big time.
Because it's interesting in those jobs, right? Those big jobs. And I look at that because I look at like dispatch and those kinds of things in the emergency services as big jobs. This is like literally when we say life or death. Yeah, these are life or death. And you know, I imagine that we have to show up. And I do this because I feel like you would have to show up to that job, right? Yeah, you're using the magic of who you are, but on some level it feels like you're rising to the occasion of a job like that. And, you know, it's kind of like the identity or the person that shows up when you do that. But if that is a little bit out of alignment with, you know, what you need and who you are, then that's when you're going to start to see things start to kind of crumble. Now, you know, right now, being that we are in the marathon of all the shifts and changes that have gone on in 2020, you know, I don't love to use the word COVID. So let's just say we're in a bit of a muck right now. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, I see a lot of these very same types of things show up on small levels and big levels. It's kind of like, you know, having a kid to save your marriage. It's just not a good idea. And if you had any of these things that were cracking the foundation before all of the stress of 2020 started, there's a good chance that it's increased, that it's gotten worse, unless you did a whole about face, which some people have. I've seen that. There's so much clarity coming in 2020, painfully, just like you talked about. Things that are clear don't always feel awesome in the moment, but you do have an opportunity to shift it. So what are you seeing in the people around you right now that are kind of cause for concern for you?
Oh, a lot. But first I wanted to say, when you were doing this, you totally, that actual action is something that I would do when I was working. So like that movement, because I could be sitting there and you're like, the call would just literally come into your ear. You didn't pick up a phone. It just comes into your headset. And if something big was about to happen, or I can picture I'd be dispatching and get a pursuit, and those are very dangerous. Yeah. And I could be sitting kind of like relaxed, and as soon as my body would go like this, and I would just go, and my back would go completely straight, but I would do that whole thing that you just said.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because that's what I imagine. You'd be like gathering yourself and coming up, which means, like, if we look at that, extrapolate, which also means that we have to do this afterwards. And it's kind of like, what happens in between the this and the this when you start doing it for like 10 and 15 and 18 years? I mean, this becomes like it. I feel like it would just drain your resources in such a large way. Now,
it's just a heightened state always. Because if you picture like that, like you're never letting yourself down. It's the hypervigilance and your surroundings. It's always up.
Well, isn't that kind of in a lot of ways what a lot of people are doing right now, right?
Yes.
Hypervigilance, this kind of like seeing this in this perpetual state of anticipation, in many ways, waiting for the shoe to drop, wondering. I recognized partway through the season, let's just say, that I
call it March break.
Well, yeah, I call it 50.
Still March break.
50 Shades of Beige. I noticed the reason I called it 50 Shades of Beige is because I didn't even realize just partway through what was going on, thankfully like 8 or 10 weeks in, I was realizing that I was in a perpetual state of inhalation. Like I was just like that. I was rising. I was on alert. And I know that as a chiropractor as being in a heightened state of, you know, your sympathetic nervous system, my adrenaline, my cortisol, my body was, you know, it's all great in the times that you want to use your sympathetic nervous system or your fight or flight response, because it helps you gather your resources for the seconds and moments that you're supposed to be there. Now, the problem is, which you experienced for probably 18 years and I've experienced, is that we're not built to live in that state. And as a chiropractor who measured sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system states for years, the majority of the population live in a low level, heightened sympathetic or fight or flight stress response at the best of times.
Yeah.
So I know the reservoir and the reserves are low to begin with. So when something like this happens, where there's a general sense of lack of control, you know, well, let's just say that a lack of control. We think we have a lot of control in our lives. We probably don't have as much control as we think, but we really feel like there's a lack of control right now. I know that sympathetic nervous system's on overdrive. So, you know, if you were to think back and now knowing what you know, what are some of the things people should be looking for to have cause for concern? You know, I have a few ideas, but how does it show up? It shows up.
Yeah, I think what I see a lot of, like, to go back to your first question first, is, and I mentioned this to you when we were talking, but so many people, there's so many causes right now, and they're big and they're all important, but you can't fight every battle. You can't. And you can't be the poster child for every cause. And I'm seeing that every time I go on my social media. I can see people, whether it's like there's so many things happening right now.
Yeah, like whether it's like Black Lives Matter, or whether we're talking about Save the Children. I mean, let's just name it. Or we're talking about, you know, the people who are dying, or we're talking about the anxiety from school, or we're talking about the people who are secondarily suffering as a result. It is, if you are a female, otherwise known / as an empath, probably, you are feeling this, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. And I was talking to Gareth, my husband, today. Yeah. And we went out for lunch together. We do this. We take ourselves out for lunch. We try to go once a week, just the two of us. Yeah. And we're talking about this, and I said, you know, I notice, like, on my social media, because that's kind of how you see people right now. Yeah. But on the men are complaining and they're posting their rants, which fine, like, some of them are whatever. Everybody's entitled to their opinions. But the women are like, let's go and let's do this and let's fight this. And there was one group, like a woman that I know, that created this group to make a change. And the intention was very good behind it. And she invited me to it. And it was like for like one of these big causes, and everybody was very much caught up in I don't want to say hype, because it makes it sound like it's not important, but there is hype around everything. Yeah. And she invited me to it, and I got in there and I kind of poked around to see what it was about. Like, I knew her intention, but it was like witch hunts. So people that didn't agree with their narrative, or like, they were literally like screenshotting profiles of people that weren't aligned with what they were doing, and it's making it worse. So I just sent her a message and I said, I have to respectfully decline, and I wanted to let you know why, so that you didn't just think I disappeared. And I said, I understand why you're doing this, and I respect it and I appreciate it. I said, but I think the message is getting lost here. And I think if we all are having conversations like this, or in person or whatever, which is what I prefer, because I am not really interested in keyboard warriors, that's when change is going to happen. If you're having these one-on-one conversations or in your community, it's not going to be online, because for every person that has this view, you've got 100 with this one, and it's just causing more and more angst and more anxiety and stress and hate. And that's what I just keep seeing over and over again. And
so my concern around that, and I couldn't agree more, by the way, is that, you know, we maybe aren't taking the time to check in with how we are truly feeling. And I think if there was ever a time to kind of adopt the phrase know thyself, it's right now. You know, some people can maybe show up to those types of things, you know, for positive or negative, right? But they can show up to those things and they have that level of resiliency where, you know, maybe they have the activism gene, I don't know, but they seem to be fine, right? Let's just say they seem to be fine. But ourselves, we might show up to one of those situations and we recognize, hopefully right away, that we don't have the bandwidth for it, right? And we, thankfully, you were kind enough to let someone know, but you recognized within yourself that it wasn't for you. And so, you know, I feel like this is a conversation that is really important to have, which is, if I've said it once, I've said it 15 times already, this feels like a marathon. And I don't mean like I know where it's going or anything, but it just feels like, you know, whatever is all the different things that are layering on right now, they're just not going to disappear in a week. So it's like, this is the time where we have to say, okay, I'm not in a sprint, I'm in some level of endurance event. And if I'm in an endurance event, and I've done Ironman, I can tell you this, you need to stop and take stock of where you're at. So if you know you have a bucket full of resilience, just for whatever reason, that's what you're coming in, then maybe you can manage. I don't mean psychologically, although yes, psychologically, but I mean just literally, like you have the bandwidth to handle it. But if you know you feel anxiety, you can't sleep after, it runs around and around and around in your mind, you're second guessing yourself, you don't feel like yourself, you're excessively tired, you're numbing yourself wherever you can, you're turning to anything, pot, alcohol, whatever you're doing to try and cope, and you know in your heart, you might have a good story as to why, it's perfectly fine. But if you ask yourself at the end of the day, why am I doing these things, right? Am I doing these things to try and cope and show up in the life that I'm in? Like for you, back in the heat of it, put your kids on the bus, your way of coping might have been, I need to lie myself down because I got to go to work later and I'm at zero right now, right? I mean, that's kind of like the far ends of the spectrum. But for the people who are not feeling like the women right now, and I know many of us are sitting here going, I don't feel like the way I want to feel. And it's pushing back the things that are no longer for you and saying, you know, what can I do? And part of that is just keep asking yourself, what do I need? What do I need? What do I need? Because you know, don't you?
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, and I said today when we were talking at lunch too, that I don't think there's ever been a more important time than right now to look after your own house. Like if you can't be so external and with everything going on and want to be involved and not be looking after your own house. And by that I mean yourself and then your family.
Yeah.
Because it's not sustainable. And I said that at the beginning of this when they're like yeah
Yeah.
with like the group that I was brought to, I said like this isn't sustainable. Like if you want to create change, it has to be sustainable. You can't go guns blazing and think that that's gonna make lasting change. You're making a lot of noise right now, but how many people, I want to be careful, but how many people did you see posting about certain things at a certain time and then it fizzles out and they're not? Like, so it was that, yeah. And then I don't want to say it's forgotten, but like people are getting tired. And like you said, they're numbing out because there's just so much, it's nonstop access to information and you don't know who to believe. You don't know what's true, what's right, what's wrong. And everybody's got these different opinions.
Yeah.
I think now more than ever, you have to look after you before anybody else.
Yeah. What are some of the things you do to look after you?
Oh, well,
I'll share some of mine and you share some of yours.
It's the people. We do see friends because I believe that it's important to have face-to-face friendships still.
Yeah.
I limit my time that I'm reading certain things. Something that I learned a long time ago in my job was to not really buy into the media because I learned early on how much of it actually is false, because there would actually be things I was involved in
Yeah.
and then see it reported.
That's how I came to that too. I was like, I was there.
Yeah, that's not what
That's
happened.
not what happened. Like at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And after that happens 4 or 5 times, you're like, okay, so there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me know.
Exactly.
All right.
And we used to
Okay.
have them, they used to phone us and try to get information from us and all kinds of weird things they would do. But so that I limit that. And Gareth and I, we've been going for drives, just taking, even if we just go into Newmarket, so like 10 minutes, it'll take us sometimes a half an hour or an hour to get home, because we'll just, oh, go this way, and we're just going different ways. And simple stuff like that I've been doing for a while. Like, rather than jumping on the highway, which would take me 5 minutes, I take back roads. And I listen to podcasts. Every day I have some sort of podcast on, and I do it while I'm in the shower. So I put it on the shelf, and because I'm stuck there anyway, and
Yeah.
so I don't feel like it's taking anything out of my day. I watch what I eat. I take my supplements that I know help with my health. And I don't know, I'm sure there's probably tons of stuff.
You know what's so interesting about that is because I know when I ask a lot of my health professional friends, what do you do that adds this way, that contributes to your ability to have the resilience that you're looking for? And a lot of times we discount it because it's become such a habit.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can say things as simple as slowing down, like slowing way the fuck down. And, we might be working off of an old program, right? Like an old program that says what slowing down looked like, because I have never been so slow in 2020. And there are times that it's not slow enough. And I keep having to find a new level, a new gear, a new way. And if I have to show up for your job and those kinds of things, then I make sure that all the other things I do are slowed down. So for example, my partner asked me, can we go to such and such's house on Tuesday? And I'm like, well, we're at your dad's on Monday. And he's like, yeah. And I can't do 2 things in a row.
I do that too.
He was like, what?
No.
I was like, no, I can't. He's like, okay, how about Thursday? I was like, Monday, Tuesday. I was like, I can do Thursday. And I guess the whole point is, who you are and what you needed 6 weeks ago may not be who you are and what you need 6 minutes ago. So I guess that part of it is you've not been here. I'm just not talking about COVID. I'm just talking about where you are in
right
this
now
of your life. You've never been here before. So don't assume that the rules and the habits and the regulations, the self-regulations you made for yourself 6 years ago even remotely pertains to where you are in this moment. So it's kind of like, in some ways life has slowed down, but things have sped up. It's like things are becoming clearer for people. This is the part that doesn't feel so good. But if you can give yourself the latitude to allow yourself time to process it and integrate it, and kind of be compassionate to yourself that you're not going to feel the way maybe you felt in the past, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is different. I feel like you can find the next gear, right? Like you can find your resilience. Yeah. I've watched you with your level of presence. Let me just say, it was one of the things that drew me to want to have the conversation, because I knew you'd had burnout over a number of years, understandably so, to the point where, they're talking PTSD. You have created a massive change in your mindset, your structure, your habits, your nutrition, who you work with from a healthcare practitioner perspective, the onus you put on yourself to do, I'll say, the work kind of thing. And I see that parallel to what's going on right now. You know, I was imagining in my own mind that, Erin, you're sitting there going, looking around going, that's not sustainable. Be careful with that. I'm worried about you. Right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because I do see a therapist
Yeah.
once a week, and I also see a life coach, and like those like stuff that I never even it was I never even thought of before, but I'm so grateful now. But when about 2 months after everything started here, I said to my therapist, she's like, "How are you?" Like we're doing Zoom calls, and I said, "I'm actually really good." And she's like, "Really?" She goes, "So everybody else is freaking out and you're good." And I said, "Yeah, because I feel like right now," and this was like a couple months ago, we're on the same playing field right now. Whereas when I first went off, the rest of the world kept going.
Hmm.
And I felt like I was stuck back, and I learned I'm a perfectionist, and I know I'm an achiever and all these things. So it really bothered me that I felt like I was held back and everybody else was still going. So then all of a sudden the world stops and I'm like, hey, I got company. Like
You're like, come along with me. I got something to
come
show.
on. We were laughing because she's like, it's true, because there's like an identity thing, right? And like
Hmm.
I had an identity with that job. And I actually came across like a Facebook live video I did like a few years before I went off, and I called it identity crisis.
Hmm.
But you identify with whatever your career is. Like, so I would find myself saying I'm a police dispatcher or I'm a 911 call taker, and then I'm like, that's not what I am. That's a job that I do. It's not who I am.
Right.
But that's like what you end up doing. Like, I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
No, that's what you do,
It's not who
but
you
that's
are.
not, you weren't born a doctor. So I had this
Or a
like,
mother.
exactly,
Yeah.
like I'm a woman
Yeah.
who is also a mother
Yeah.
who did that job. Like, and there was like a mourning process along with everything else. Like, so there was the burnout, but then there was also a mourning to an identity that I had.
Hmm.
And I think as I've sat back and watched all of this, I think a lot of that is happening to other people still, whether you lost a job or you kept your job. But the bottom line is your life did a 180. Everybody's did. And it's okay to mourn what you had, but you gotta, it's hard to pull yourself back out of that and adjust to what is.
Yeah. I think that
So
was really, really profound. Let me just, I was giving it a pregnant pause there for a second. No, I mean, I, I think that's kind of the silver lining in this is that, give yourself time to grieve. You know, I know you had, your children were transitioning in school. I think it was your son that was going, do I want to say high school?
yeah, they both.
Yeah.
So Avery she's going
Right.
into a new school
Yeah.
for grade 7, and he's going into grade 9. So both going into new schools this year.
So they both missed out on their grad. My son, one of my sons missed out
Yeah.
on his grade 12 grad. And I guess, and I've missed out on things, and I'm sure you missed out. And that's the part where we want to suck it up. The comparative suffering thing comes in, and we're like, you know, when people post, they're like, our grandparents are asked to go to war. All you have to do is, you know, suck it up. I'm just like, oh, let's not do that. Like,
Don't minimize it.
I guess I get what's happening. So if you're the person that's minimizing how you're feeling, allow the grief to come up, to move through you, support yourself in whatever way you need, reach out, be exceptionally kind to yourself, surround yourself with the right messages and the right people, and know that it will move through you. It will move and keep moving. And that means that what it leaves in the aftermath of it is space for new beginnings. And so that's the part where I think we can all sort of be a little bit interested and excited and wondering and curious and optimistic and feeling hopeful about, is that you know, I call it clarity. I love clarity. It's, it's one of the things I'm always looking for. Not so comfortable, but so, so awesome. So I think you nailed it, Erin. Have that opportunity to kind of sit with what is, and kind of recognize that we're all having our kind of, even though it's collective, we're having our own process right now.
Yeah, like, not to say it's not total crap, because it is.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're going to find a person on the planet that doesn't, like, that disagrees with that. Like, nobody's thrilled about the situation, but like, I see people that are adjusting and pivoting and going in a different direction, and maybe like this was what they needed to change, and maybe that they hated that job, and or maybe this has given them time to do something on the side that they've always wanted to do, or like, here I am, I'm about to homeschool Avery. Like,
I
if
bet you didn't see that coming.
I did not see that coming. But I'm actually excited about it, because we're doing it with some other parents, and like, she's gonna have this great group that's supporting her. And like, I've always been like an optimist, even with so much negativity around me. I've always been an optimist, to the point where, like, I've actually had people from that job say to me, like, it's about time, like, you didn't fit there. But I still am, like, I'm looking at it, and but I get how people are feeling right now, and I get that, like I said, with all these causes people want to jump on, and it's the distraction. Like, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to be the poster child, and like hold up the poster, like whatever, and I'm going to protest this, or whatever it is. And are you really actually paying attention to how you're feeling, or are you just using that as your distraction? Because for me, I did a couple of fitness competitions. I know you did, like, your Ironmans and all of that. Like, it was like, look, and when you talk about nutrition, people thought I was like, obviously they thought, like, she must know all of this stuff. No, I didn't. I just followed a coach. And what it wasn't healthy. And my body has shown me that. But it was distraction. Now I just know it was all distraction. And I just see, like, everybody just distracted, and who's actually got their eyes in their own lane. It's
so I think that's really important. And if we can end this on anything, I would say, you know, we know when we're distracting ourselves. We might have a good story about why we're doing it. We might even say we need to do it, but we know in our heart of hearts when we're distracting. And if you use that as your sign to sit back and ask yourself, what are you really distracting yourself from? Letting yourself go through that process, I think, will be incredibly, incredibly liberating. And not to mention, allow yourself to shore up your resources so that you can show up for yourself, and for the people most important in your life, because honestly, we need to take care of ourselves right now if we're going to have any hope in hell of helping out the people around us. True?
Yeah, and just like giving yourself grace, right? Like, that's something that I had to learn to do, like, for like the fatigue part. Like, if I needed to have a nap, I felt this guilt that I should be doing something else. Like, there's laundry to be done, or I should be out doing this, or whatever it was, and not listening to what my body needed or my mind needed, and still, like, pushing myself to do all the things instead of just giving myself the grace to have the damn nap. And now I'm just like, screw it, I'm going for a nap.
Now you're like the professional napper.
I'm a professional.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. I so appreciate that you would come on here. I feel that we can never have too many discussions about, you know, just nurturing our needs, supporting ourselves, and recognizing when we're going into a path that is really becoming an issue in terms of flaring up mental health illness, put us in places of chronic anxiety, spurring depression, you name it. It has been incredibly stressful, and I worry about my fellow person. I really do, not to mention my own self and my family. So I know that your words are resonating a lot with people in our group, and can create sort of a course correction for a few of them. So thank you so much for meeting me and meeting me on here. And I hope we get some face-to-face time really soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thanks, Erin. Talk to you soon. And for
Okay.
everybody's on here, whether you are watching in real time, thanks for being here, or in replay, we also appreciate you. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.